Lively and unrehearsed, we welcome you into another edition of Moral Side of the News. I'm John Blim with the WHAS Crusade for Children. With me today is a distinguished panel from left to right. Father Joe Graffis, Archdiocese of Louisville. Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Centenary United Methodist Church, New Albany. Rabbi Stan Miles, Louisville Melton School. And Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray, Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary. Welcome to you, panel. We begin today with the full-fledged surprise attack on Israel. Hamas militants unleashed terror by the air, the sea, and ground, including at a music festival where young people were gunned down and abducted. More than 1,200 Israelis were killed, followed by at least 900 other people killed when Israel retaliated with airstrikes in Gaza. Panel, at least 25 Americans are dead, and the U.S. is pledging support for Israel. Let's hear your reaction.
I'm still in a state of shock. When I heard about the acts last Saturday morning, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, but then I did believe it. Let's get one thing straight. We're not talking about Jews and Arabs. We're not talking about Jews and Palestinians. We're talking about Jews and terrorists.
Amen.
We're talking about people who existentially want to destroy every Jewish person on the face of the earth. Kill man, woman, child, baby. We're talking about intense, great evil here. Because I feel that there are millions of people of goodwill who happen to be Jewish, who happen to be Palestinian, and a terrible, terrible, vicious minority who are doing these murderous things. These people were referred to as militants. Right. You know what? I think calling them militants is letting them off the hook. They're not militants, they're terrorists. And when this started, the Jewish community around the world got together, and we had a meeting at the Traeger Family Jewish Community Center this Tuesday evening, and there were about 1,000 people of all religions, of all races, and it was a great program. And on my way, I had to park literally across the street from the center. And on my way to the car, there were some people standing at the corner with a Palestinian flag, and they were screaming. And what were they saying? They were saying, "From the river to the sea, Palestine must be free." And now that might sound like an innocuous statement, but to me it means the Jewish people have no right to be in our ancestral homeland, period. And that's a frightening thought. In the press conference that President Biden had this week, he told an anecdote about meeting with Prime Minister Golda Meir of blessed memory, as it was right before the Yom Kippur War. Right. And Prime Minister Meir saying to then Senator Biden, you know, we have a secret weapon. And Biden said, "What's the weapon?" And Meir said, "We have no other place to go." And that's true. We have no other place to go, and the Holocaust proved that. That's the whole problem, folks. This past Saturday, the last time that number of Jews were killed in one day, the gas chambers were still functioning at Auschwitz. And so many times we say never again. Right. Well, never has happened.
Stan, I think from all of us here, our certain great sympathy to you, our Jewish community here in Louisville and throughout the world. I'm certainly a person who wants peace, but when you see hate and evil, it's impossible to kind of have peace. And so Israel needs to be defended against such evil. And what I hurt for, having been to Israel several times myself, is the whole fact that the poor people who are Palestinians, Israelis, who don't hate each other, are getting caught in the middle of all of this. And even if there is invasion into Gaza, so many innocent people and civilians will be killed as well as soldiers, and it's like, I was earlier today at a synagogue with some other Jewish friends, and the word was sad. We are all sad, and that's the biggest feeling. And I thought he captured that well. We are sad for what's happening in Israel, what's happening in Ukraine, and there's so many similarities there. There's lots of differences, of course, but it's the same kind of hatred and attacks on innocent people, unjustifiably so. And how you deal with that from our religious traditions is really, really difficult, because I think peace is better, but you can't negotiate with terrorists. And how do we work our way through this to help the innocent and help those who cannot help themselves in the midst of all of this? And how do we pray for it all? And we need God.
May I posit an existential question here? Because this is really troubling me, and maybe you have an answer. I don't. How do you think God wishes us to confront this obvious evil in the world? How does God want us to deal with this as human beings, as souls created in God's image?
I wish I knew the answer to that question. I think that's one of the mysteries of life. I mean, unfortunately, revenge is so an easy human phenomenon, and I can't blame people that want revenge, but revenge only leads to more violence and not a solution. And I'm not sure we've got answers to all of that, but maybe some of you do.
The first word that popped into my head, and it's not to be taken tritely, is the teaching from my Christian faith that says to love your enemies. I don't think I'm there in this situation. But then the other word that occurs to me is what we have through faith tradition and holding on to the image of God in which we are all created is a sense of hope. And when hope is gone, then I think we are filled with an emptiness over which nothing else can fill. And I also believe that from that hope, that peace is birthed. It's held on to. I don't know how to make that happen except one incident at a time and in relationship with others, if that makes sense. But it's so hard to grasp that in this horrific moment, in this defining moment in history.
I think that part of, from my theology and the way that I understand God, is that part of our responsibility to one another is to love one another, but also to love one another in a way that encourages us to defend ourselves at the threat of violence. I think that that has to be part of what we inculcate as part of our faith, is that as we give respect to others, we respect ourselves enough to defend ourselves and to make sure that we are protected. There were persons who were slaughtered this past weekend who tried to do that and were overcome by the unfair coagulation of weapons from persons who are not part of the loving contingent of humanity. Their full focus is murder and mayhem and death. This is why you can't negotiate with persons like that, because those persons wish for the complete extermination and elimination of Jewish people anywhere on the earth. I think that our faith should include our ability and our fire to defend ourselves against evil. Evil has to be, in the scriptures, it is understood that evil is to be resisted. It is to be resisted in all ways that we can. One way to resist it is to make sure that the seeds of evil are addressed. And in our country, in the Middle East, and around the world, the seeds of evil begins with words. We tolerate hate-filled words. We allow words to foment and grow into a blind hatred that dehumanizes other human beings. When you listen to the rhetoric of Hamas and all of the other Muslim-based terrorist groups, you hear the language that is spoken, that is undergirded by their misunderstanding of their own faith. It is a total misunderstanding of their own faith. But the words that they speak that are spoken to those who depend on them for life and sustenance breeds that hatred. We see that in this country right now. We see that with white supremacists that are fomenting all kinds of hatred against those that they feel are keeping them from enjoying life as they imagine it. We need to resist any expression, any tangential expression of words that can grow into the manifestation of hatred as we've seen this weekend. We have politicians in a particular political party who has not spoken one word about what has happened this past weekend and tolerate hate-filled words that their flagship candidate speaks almost on a daily, and that we've heard words of that have come from our legislators in Congress that have been very hate-filled, with no check on that, almost no check from the body politic. So I think that the way that we would understand God's admonition for us to love our enemies is to love our enemies enough to confront our enemies and to hold them accountable for their hatred in whatever way that is necessary to ensure the safety of our children, of our wives, of the women, of our elderly. One more thing, I just think it really needs to be said. There is absolutely no question about what we're dealing with when we're dealing with what has happened over the weekend. There is no justification for what has happened. There is absolutely no ideology that justifies. There is absolutely no way of imagining human beings in any way that justifies the barbarity that took place. And everyone of goodwill, not only just our leaders, not only just those of us who have microphones of influence, but every person of goodwill must speak the same, that this is barbarism. This is not humanity. This is not the majority of humanity. These are persons who have been completely taken over by evil and to do what has been done to babies, to children watching parents in front of them being massacred, there is absolutely, we have to be unified as a human race to be completely unchanged and unadulterated with that. There is no room for that type of behavior.
I agree with you, Kilen. Unfortunately, you mentioned there are Muslim terrorists, and yet not all Muslims, as you well said, will say it's against our Quran.
That's exactly right.
I remember I was in Israel 20-some years ago during 9/11, and we walked out in the streets the day after 9/11, and several Muslims came off
That's
the
right.
streets and said,
That's right.
it is wrong what happened
That's
to
right.
you and your country. It is against our Quran. We pray for you, and we welcome you. And I said, wow. And everybody was worried about me. But we have Christian extremists.
That's right.
As we well know. And
That's
there's
right.
so many.
The disease is fanaticism.
That's it.
Exactly.
Yes, sir.
And we know no religion, no country, no race is immune from this disease.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely.
That's right. And that's what has to be addressed continuously, without let up. We have to confront with different ideas, with different ways of modeling love, but holding persons who hold these types of fanatical ideas, we have to hold them accountable. And we have to have the corroboration and collaboration and cooperation of legislative power to do that. That there has to be laws passed, there has to be ordinances passed within local municipalities that matches that type of love. So when I understand love to be beyond an empathic feeling for another human being, but love being an action word that does whatever is necessary to to value another person's humanity, to honor another person that God created, but also have enough love to protect ourselves from those times when evil manifests itself in such an ugly and hate-filled way.
So following up, I heard Harriet use the word hope. What hope do the four of you have of any resolution?
May I share a story?
Sure.
Because the story mirrors the hope that I have. The last time I visited Israel was in the winter of 2018, 2019. I took one of my grandsons over right after his bar mitzvah because he wanted to see Israel. And he was and is a soccer player. And we say certain prayers at this time of the year, and they're prayers asking God for rain. And in 2018, the prayers were answered and answered and answered. But finally, it was the Sabbath, and it was the afternoon, and the rain had finally stopped, and we were in Jerusalem. And he said, he brought a soccer ball to Israel with a pump to blow it up. So he said, Saba, which is the Hebrew word for grandfather, Saba, could I go kick around the soccer ball a little bit? And I said, yeah. And we were near a place in Jerusalem called Liberty Bell Park that was built in honor of the bicentennial of the United States of America. And I knew that there was a soccer pitch in the park, so we walked over to Liberty Bell Park. It was literally across the street from our hotel. And my grandson goes out into the pitch, and Elijah starts kicking around the soccer ball. And we see about, a half dozen boys coming into the pitch on bicycles. And they are Muslim kids. And they didn't speak English, and we didn't speak Arabic, but they gestured, could we join and play? And so Elijah said, yeah, sure, come on over, let's play. So they started kicking the ball around together. And then a few minutes later, a family of Christian tourists from Germany walked into the pitch with kids of that age. And the German kids, their English was better than mine. They said, may we join the soccer game? And sure, come on in. So on a beautiful Sabbath afternoon in Jerusalem, we had an American Jewish kid who was born in Guatemala. We had about a half dozen Islamic kids, and I would presume they lived in Jerusalem. And we had a bunch of Christian kids from Germany just playing soccer together.
Yeah.
That's my dream.
Yeah.
And when things like last weekend happened, I think back and I think, is my dream dead? And my answer, it's not yes, and it's not no. It's I hope not.
Well, I think we had some hope before this incident, you know, especially with Israel and Saudi Arabia potentially maybe bringing some peoples together. And I'm sure this incident is probably to go against that. And certainly it's probably set that back several years. But I think for all of us in various religious traditions, how can we bring humanitarian aid? How can we find safe exits for the innocent people, the people who were not Hamas, who just want to save their families? We've got to try to figure out some ways of doing that. Obviously, but they've got hostages all over the place, including Americans. You can't negotiate with terrorists, or if you do, I don't know how one does that. But I think there's little things that we can perhaps do that I'm hopeful for. But saner minds, if there is such a thing, is got to be a part of this.
The sad thing about it, go ahead.
Well, and tagging on to that, I think one of the important things that we can do is to recognize the pain that is within our own country from this. So we can support Stan, and we can support all those who are affected by this in a personal way that we may never have imagined. And the other goes back to what Kilen said, and that is to pour into these communities, these little pieces of earth where we reside, a new vocabulary that has more power than the words of hate. And that'll take a lot of brush strokes, but that is where my hope lies.
And we've got to continue to overcome anti-Semitism and anti-Muslimism.
Yes.
Yes. And there's both of those within in our own country, and that's where I think we've got to come together as a country. And I think we're seeing some of that in Louisville, and I know a couple other things are happening in the next couple of months, which is going to bring a lot of our interfaith community together. We can start in our corner, and we may not be able to solve Israel, but maybe we can begin some steps in our own country, because we need healing over here, as you've said already.
My place that I find hope is in the everyday ordinary. And what I mean by that is that, for the most part, what Stan has described in his story about the soccer field, that's every day in Louisville. That's every day in our country. People are being abundantly human to one another. For the most part, it misses the news. We don't get to see that on a daily coverage of the news. These episodes globally of heinous insanity are such aberrations of what is happening on a daily around the world. And if we can find a way to lift that up, that what we saw and heard about, and what's breaking our hearts about this past weekend, as with other tragedies that we've experienced, are aberrations of the usual human drama of life. My hope is in the not only what's happening with our communities coming together to support the Jewish people, But what happened when Breonna Taylor was murdered and George Floyd was murdered? What happened when we see other persons, when Muslims are mistreated and the community as a whole comes together to, that's every day. That's who we are as human beings every single day. And it's the everyday, normal, daily that gives me hope, that we can, while we grieve together and cry together and weep together, that we can continue to push forward love in the way that our faith traditions teach us. It's what we see mostly on the daily.
All right, panel, a good start and almost an end to our program, Moral Side of the News, but I want to get one more topic in, a bit of good news as we say goodbye this week. A tip of the hat to Charles Chuck Feeney. He died at age 92. Mr. Feeney was born working class and believed in giving while living. He amassed a fortune, gave it all away, more than $8 billion, often without anyone knowing about it. Panel, Mr. Feeney is true example. You can't take it with you. And I want to end with that just on a good note, juxtapose our first topic with this topic. About 2 minutes left.
I hope he bought soccer balls for everyone.
And gave them out freely?
Yes.
There's a legend in my tradition, and that is that the world exists because there are 36 righteous human beings walking the face of the earth. And they're of all different religions, nationalities, races, what have you. I think Mr. Feeney was one of those individuals, and I hope that his place has been taken.
I was thinking as I'm reading the story, and I'm sure all the ministers here would, and Rabbi would agree, this month it seems like every organization that I know of has been asking me to get some money for them by contacting people, and I said, oh my God, I just can't go to all these people like crazy because there's so much need out there, and of course they always come to the minister to do that. What's the first thing most people complain about? Oh, you ministers, you're always asking for money about something. And it's like, okay, we see a need out there. And that sense of generosity in people, we need that sense in a lot of people who forget about that.
Kilen, I'll let you have the last word.
You can't take it with you. There's not a hearse that goes, there's not a trailer that trails behind you when the hearse rolls you to your gravesite. You can't take it with you. Enjoy life, but not things.
Excellent. Thank you to our panel today, Father Joe Graffis, Reverend Harriett Akins-Banman, Rabbi Stan Miles, and Reverend Dr. Kilen Gray. You can catch this program again anytime on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Moral Side of the News. Join us again next week with an all-new conversation. Until then, thanks for your time. So long for now.